the metaverse for me feels like it's set up for failure. Like a lot of what we've seen out there seems like a repeat of things that have already kind of petered out or not really been that successful. When I saw Zuckerberg's demo of the future of the metaverse and he showed two people sitting down virtually playing chess with each other, I was like, we're not thinking big enough. Like this is like I was doing that on AOL in 1997.
Alejandro, how we doing?
Dude, doing amazing, Matt. Just super excited to be here. Who do we have on today?
Really special guest. We have Kevin Rose, previously co-founder of Digg, Zero, Oak, a really savvy investor, currently partner at True Ventures, which is a VC firm focused on early stage tech startups. And he's the founder of Proof Collective, where he took his Proof podcast and turned it into an incredibly successful NFT project, a private group of about 1,000 dedicated NFT collectors and artists. And it's been amazing to see it blossom. The floor for the Proof membership pass is currently at 68 ETH. And they have a ton of interesting things in the works. Yeah, including their upcoming Moonbirds project, which we'll dig into. What excites you about this conversation, Ale?
And I'm really excited to hear about his transition from the Web 2 world into the Web 3, his intentionality around building community and the value add that he is consistently bringing. I'm also really energized around what he's thinking about the future of NFTs and Web 3 look like, because I know he's a very big proponent of innovation and pushing the envelope.
100%. Really excited to dive into it. Before we do, just want to remind you to check out our newsletter. You can sign up at nftnow.com. Each week, we distill everything that's happening in the NFT space into actionable insights for you so you can keep a finger on the pulse. Without any further ado, Kevin Rose. Kevin, how's it going, man? Glad to have you on the NFT Now podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. No, I know you got a lot of exciting things in the works and really looking forward to diving into it. For those of our listeners who don't know, why don't we just chat a little bit about your backstory and your introduction to NFTs and how you kind of made your journey into Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, by mistake, I think with a lot of us, I was very lucky, right time, right place to be there when the CryptoPunks originally launched, and I picked up 10 of them. And it was just because a buddy was like, you should check this out, and then I immediately forgot about the wallet. Years went by and did a mad scramble to be like, okay, these things are now worth a few $1,000s a piece. I should look and see if I can find them again, And so I know a lot of people have a very similar story with all things crypto. It's just like, you go in, you're a geek, you kick the tires of something, you play around, and then you wake up a few years later and it's they're valuable. So that was the initial kind of just this exists. This is a technology to be aware of. And then CryptoKitties, obviously I paid attention to that, and then kind of just lost track of where things were going until a little over a year ago. And it wasn't until the DeFi stuff I was still paying attention to. That was fascinating to watch that whole DeFi summer and all of that be built up. And that was more of my focus. And then really it was when Art Blocks launched that I was like, okay, this is interesting. This is something that I should really see how the market has matured since I last checked in. And that was looking at all the new exchanges that had launched and checking out Super Rare for the first time and finding some of these like digital first artists that were launching on there and seeing some of the AI art that was being produced, like so many things where had happened since I had kind of closed my eyes. And when I woke up, I was like, wow, this is a movement now. This is turning into a movement.
That's really, really awesome. And it's like I love the accidental coming into the marketplace and like being like the scramble, like, oh my God, let's get it done. In terms of like being accidental into the market, you're incredibly intentional around your current offerings of the Proof Collective. What was the inspiration and the concept behind that?
Yeah, it was one of those things where for me, podcasting actually has been something that has always led to a bunch of great friendships and eventually into investments as well. So Back in the day, it was, having the founder's Twitter on there, and that led to my, investments in that and Square and a few other things. And it was just a great networking tool. And so when I started getting interested in NFTs, I was like, well, let's launch a podcast dedicated to NFTs called Proof, and I'll get to meet a lot of these artists, So I just had a bunch of great artists like Snowfro on back in the day before those things blew up, and Tyler Hobbs when the floors were next to nothing, and all of these artists that I just had heard great things about. And that was the thinking there, is like, let's just get involved that way. But then the podcast really started to grow and kind of exceeded my expectations, to be honest. I really didn't think there was going to be that many people that cared about NFTs that quickly. And it was partially because we launched during like when things were really starting to take off, and there was a lot of attention on it from a price standpoint. And so, we went from 10 to 20 to 50,000 to 100,000 to 150,000 listeners. And I was like, wow, this is a big show now. When you're approaching those numbers, anytime you break 100K in listeners, it starts to get interesting on a handful of fronts. But I realized like there's got to be something that we can do with this community that we all can benefit from as people that are really into NFTs. And um, that it was clear that DAOs were such a fantastic structure for people coming together, but a lot of people were kind of priced out in the participation of those. Like the Flamingo DAO sold out instantly. I had to wait 6 months to get into Flamingo. When I did, it was a very kind of pricey entry point to get in. But I loved the conversation that was happening there behind the scenes. And these people were finding this the best projects, and they were cutting through all the garbage. Like when anyone is armed with Photoshop that can launch an NFT, there's always going to be just a bunch to sort through, right? And we only have so many hours a day on Discord before we go crazy. And so I quickly realized, like, let's bring together a subset of the proof community to be those eyes and ears on the ground, looking at all the latest projects, telling us which ones to pay attention to. And the thinking there was just to create a little private Discord membership around people that were really serious about NFT collecting. And that's when we launched the Proof Collective, which was 1,000 NFTs for some of the most hardcore collectors out there.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. I love how like the podcast kind of like opens up all these different new worlds and tying those things together. It's amazing. The Proof Collective membership has reached a 60/80 floor, which is a really incredible achievement. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like what factors you think have contributed most to its success.
Great questions. Honestly, I had no clue that it would ever reach this price. I'm as shocked as most people out there. And I think it's because, when we started the auction, it was a Dutch auction. It started at 5 ETH, and it sold out at 1 ETH. And I was just at that time, I had like a 10 or so myself, and I was just selling them to friends at 1 ETH, and just kind of like thought, oh, if I ever need another one, I'll just buy one off the open market, and so I only actually hold one Proof Collective pass, which is like, in retrospect, I'm like, why did it was my thing. I should have had at least more than one, right? So
Yeah, this is one of those ones that got away from me, bro. I'd be honest. Like I remember watching it when it was four ETH on the Dutch auction, and I walked away and I was like, you know what? Let me come back to it. I'll get back. And you know how the space is. You get bombarded with
yeah,
something else. Next thing I know, I think it was like a month and a half later, it was a 20 ETH floor, and I was just like, oh, my broken heart.
yeah, I had a buddy sell his, and he's like, dude, he's like, this is actually truly going to put a roof on my house. Like, he's like, don't be pissed. I'm like, I would never be pissed. Like, it's with meaningful money when it gets to those prices. It's crazy. But to answer your question about why I think it's grown, it's because we've put together a real team around it. Like, it's not just a Discord. We've hired professionals that are full-time, that are working on building out a lot of the projects that we want to launch under that brand. And so, we launched Grails, which was a pretty good success, and there was a lot of attention on that particular project. We announced our NFT conference is coming next year, which I hired Ryan Carson, who is the COO now, and he ran some of the largest Web2 conferences called Future of Web Apps back in the Web2 days, and puts on a world-class events. And so just the quality of the events that we're going to launch under his guidance is just going to be unbelievable. And then, we have a team of folks. I'm going to say it's probably going to be, by the end of this year, we're guessing it'll probably be 30 or so people working on just taking the proceeds that we've raised and reinvesting it and making it even better and better. So in the Proof Collective, in many ways, like if you think about what exists in the stock world, in the stock world, there are professional organizations that do nothing but gather data and create really in-depth research reports, right? You can think like Forrester Research or some of the other bigger names out there. Um, we want to be that for NFTs. We want to have curation with a point of view and really give people the in-depth information they need to make decisions around what to collect and which artists to pay attention to. And so it's that combined with some of the things that we're building on our own, like our own PFP project and our own unique take on the metaverse, which is a very loaded term that I don't really love, but something that we're exploring, that we'll be launching. So they know. I think that the reason the prices have climbed is because they look at the team and they see seasoned product builders, people that have delivered consumer products at scale to millions of people in the past, and they think, well, they're definitely going to build something. It won't just be a rug or something or a roadmap that just never sees the light of day.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That brings me up to a really great question because, like, I believe it's only 1,000 memberships, correct? All right, so that's an incredibly intimate community, right? Like, how do you balance maintaining the collective small and while also to growing its influence and its products, right? Like you're saying, like individuals who have grown products before to at scale, but balancing that intimacy, it's almost like a paradox. Can you dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. We think of the Proof Collective as the most hardcore NFT collectors, and it is walled off. The Discord, that version of the Proof Discord is going to be walled off. It's token gated, and so those research reports that we're talking about, we're hiring 3 full-time analysts that are writing these research reports. The early access to the podcasts, some of the more intimate like salons that we're throwing with some of the bigger artists out there, which will be in real life events. All of that is for the Proof Collective. So we plan on keeping that community tight and those resources just for that organization. So there's no plans on expansion there. The expansion comes in the world of the metaverse, in the world of Moonbirds, our 10K PFP. That's where we add additional channels to the Discord that are also token gated for those specific communities, but they have very different value propositions in terms of why people are coming there, and they actually unlock.
Makes total sense. Let's dig into Moonbirds a bit. Tell us a bit about the project. What's the mission behind it? And yeah, all the details.
Yeah, we realized that one of the things that we love to do most internally at Proof is play and experiment with what's possible and what can be done. And when we look at all of the PFP projects that are out there, some of them have done some really amazing things. Like when I first got my first vial of serum for being a Bored Ape member, I thought that was really interesting, and it was just a unique take on how to kind of morph and evolve and expand the project even further. Some of the interesting mechanics around burning to create newer editions, or there's been a lot that's done, but then there's also a ton of blue ocean. So for us, we think if we're going to create another PFP, it's not just going to be an art project. Yes, it's going to be beautiful art, but we also want to. What we do best is community and utility associated with the community, and we want to leverage those strengths into this PFP project. So what's going to happen is essentially we have these 10,000 birds, these Moonbirds, and the 2 things that we're announcing immediately are a way to nest the actual birds. So nesting is essentially flipping a little switch on the smart contract. It prevents the bird from being sold. It'll actually fail at a transaction, but it doesn't leave your wallet, which is interesting. So it's still self-custody on that side, which is nice. And then we can calculate and figure out how long you've held that birds, like how your diamond hands or diamond wings is like the joke we say internally. How long have you held those for, and what's your current streak? And that allows us to subdivide the community and provide additional benefits for the people that are really engaged and committed. Like, so it really mimics a lot of the things that we already see existing in the pre-existing kind of rewards world out there. Like if you think about higher status of tiers at credit cards or airline miles or whatever they may be, it's based on your loyalty to those particular brands. And so for us, that gives us that capital to provide even better benefits for people that are more loyal and very unique ones. So, For example, and I'm just throwing out a couple random examples. We have a Moonbird that has a glitch attribute. It's called the glitch bird, and we haven't unveiled the artwork for it yet, but it looks amazing. And if you lock up and you nest that glitch bird, there is a lot of glitch artists that we are friends with that will do specific airdrops, very small in size, but just to the people that have locked up and done that with the Moonbirds community. And so we're actually going in the a lot of these projects, a lot of PFP projects, they love turnover. They love turnover because it gives them royalties. That's how they make money. And so projects aren't incentivized to keep things locked up and to have less turnover. Like that's not our MO here. Like what we want to do is we want to actually flip that and say we care about loyalty and about like your commitment to the community and about creating a lasting durable community of people that get to hang out in real life and people. So we've got all of these plans around the unlocks that come with that community and come with that commitment and some really unique things that we can do. Another one is we have this little space helmet Moonbird, and we know some folks over at the SpaceX organization. I was lucky enough to have Elon on my podcast a few years ago, and you can imagine if you're nesting that particular bird. And granted, I'm just throwing these out. We have yet to finalize all the final reward structure, but there would be a yearly trip to SpaceX to either watch a launch or do a tour of the facility, or so it's like that kind of playing that we want to do both in real world and airdrops that is unique. It was very strange to me that for as many amazing things that the Bored Apes have done, the one thing that I felt a little bit odd was that you could buy a Bored Ape the day before they did their coin drop and get the same amount of coins as someone that was like held it since day one. And that just seemed like not really a fair distribution model. And so we're playing with what that means. And that's kind of our our moment to go out and try new things and see what sticks and see what works. And that we're product builders, so that's what we love to do most.
I love that. I love that. Another thing, kind of a conscious decision that you made around Moonbirds. I know Moonbirds does not have an allow list. You mentioned that on Twitter, sort of like that was a conscious choice to promote inclusion. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how you feel like the current climate with NFT projects is flawed in that regard, and what might be able to be done to fix that.
It's tough. It's tough because it's tempting because as a project creator and when you're creating something new for the NFT space, a lot of the emphasis is on does the collection sell out, especially in the PFP space, right? It's like, does my collection sell out? Because that if it doesn't, that's a poor signal, and people tend to run away from those. And people are buying them for the art, but they're also buying them for the investment side. It's like buying a series of baseball cards or comic books or whatever it may be. It's like you love it, but you also want to see it appreciate in value. And I think that this idea of inviting in allow lists, and this is also kind of we're stepping on our own toes here, in that the Proof Collective is allowed to mint to Moonbirds, so we are allowing our community in, but largely because they're the ones that got us here and they're the ones that provide us capital to even go off and build this thing. But outside of that, we had a lot of different projects that came to us and said, "Hey, can you allow our community in?" And it's really enticing to say, "Let's allow in the Bored Apes because we know they have deep pockets and they'll pay the highest possible premium for ours." And but it's I don't know. I felt like let's just make this is the best we can outside of the proof community. Let's make it like give everyone an equal shot. So I'm not hating on people that do that because it certainly helps people sell their projects to do these collaborations and allow lists with other communities. I don't think it's an unhealthy thing. It's just that with such a small amount of available PFPs that we're selling, and we know there's a decent amount of demand on the other side of it, I would hate to exclude certain people and only allow in a few lists, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. But I'd love to double down on this. How are you guys like making sure that bots don't run this? Right?
Yeah.
Like botting is a very real issue, right?
100%. And that's why our partners on the smart contract side are Divergence, some of the most skilled in the business. Aaron, the head developer, he's the ex 10-year senior engineer at Google, dual MD PhD, was one of the first to do fully on-chain rendering engines in Solidity, just like one of the most insane engineers I've ever met in my life. We had this conversation a few weeks ago, and I specifically went and spun up a Google instance and Google Cloud Compute to help him. He's basically building out the anti-botting infrastructure behind the scenes, and we'll do a whole debrief and blog post-launch on what we did on the anti-botting side. We can't announce that ahead of time because it'll give bots the time to go and figure it out. But it's something we take very seriously. Like, I would rather us sell out at a lower price. I mean, we're doing max 2 per wallet. Obviously, there's an easy way around that. Like, anyone can create unlimited wallets, but it's there's no silver bullet here on how to protect against that. It's like, can you stay one step ahead of them for 10 minutes? Like, because they'll quickly dig into your contracts and see everything that's going on and figure ways around it. And when I was talking to Aaron over Divergence, he's like, this game at this point is we release it, get it out there, and then they are going to try and reverse engineer as fast as they possibly can. And you just have to hope that your tech is like, just a step above for it, but they eventually will figure it out, and they'll figure out how to do this. And
You know what this reminds me of? Like in the scene in the Matrix when they have to like shut down the ship because the bugs are gonna come in. Like that. That's how I envision you telling us like the bots are gonna cry. Yeah, you gotta kill the power for a second. So like essentially your smart contract is the equivalent of shutting down the power in the Matrix so that the bugs kind of don't fly, and there's like a limited window before they actually figure it out or something along those
Right,
lines.
exactly. And so the question we had the other day was, how tight do we want to call it until we actually deploy the contract? Like, what day do we want to deploy the contract so people can see because some of that will be tied. There'll be front end antibody, but a lot of it is at the contract level. As you know, people like engineers talk directly with the contract when they're doing this. And he's like, we want to kind of wait to the last possible second before deploying this so that we can actually, give us the best odds at preventing a lot of the botting.
Makes total sense, and it's great to hear how intentional and thoughtful you're being about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Like, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned from launching Proof Collective that you're kind of applying now as you sort of write its next chapter?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, it's that we have a zero tolerance policy. We specifically wrote in the terms of use that even though you hold a Proof Collective pass, that does not guarantee you access to our Discord. It does in that they can just come in and they can auth in and they'll be a member, but we have the right to kick them out. And we, like, all the different things you can imagine, the big offenders around racism, around sexism, all that behavior is like completely, we protect against that. And we do it in we do it in a volunteer way and also a non-volunteer way. We hire full-time moderators that are on salary so that they are actively in there and they have a deep vested interest in caring for this community. Support channels, help channels. There's people in all different areas of their journey of NFT collecting. We actually have some people that bought this as their very first NFT, and they're just here to learn. So, there's no bad questions or dumb questions. We've had people say, I bought a ledger and I have no clue what I'm doing here. Help me figure this out. Like, so there's a ton of things that we want to provide in terms of education as well, to help bring everyone along for the ride. But I think it's just, for me, it's been let's wow people with the amount of resources and products that we're building rather than overpromise and underdeliver, or overpromise and underdeliver. So that's been a kind of a big core principle that we have internally, is like, let's just we might need to overstaff a little bit, but I'd rather overstaff than have problems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, actually. I just want to transition the conversation over to more of your investor hat days. Like, you are an incredible angel investor and also an investor in the ecosystem. Pretty much you've invested with the who's who of the space as well, alongside from a lot of your investments in this capacity. So love to get your perspective of, like, from an investor standpoint, What do you look for in NFT projects that you support and align behind?
Yeah, it's a great question. It always comes down to first and foremost, who is the entrepreneur and the person behind the project. Are they looking to build a lifestyle business, or are they looking to build something much bigger? Because when you're a venture capitalist, while there can be fantastic businesses that make a few $1 million a year in revenue, that are run by a handful of people, and those are great. There's no shame in that at all. Venture outcomes are in the when you talk about the billions of dollars, right? That's what VCs play for, and that's what your LPs, your investors, are also asking of you. And so, we look for products and projects and entrepreneurs that are wanting to go and just absolutely dominate a space. And that's why when we raised a very small round of funding. I'm a partner at True Ventures, and True put a little bit of funding into what we're doing over at Proof. And there were two reasons I wanted to do that. We didn't need the money. We were fine with the Proof Collective Pass raise and all that stuff. The reason I want to do it is, one, I think True has fantastic resources that we could tap into from just a legal standpoint, and their whole thing. I could get into that, but I'm not here to pitch the whole firm. But the other main important signals I think that VCs can bring is that when you see an organization is venture backed, and especially in DeFi, it gives you a little bit of like, okay, they aren't going to pull out the rug from underneath me here. You know what I mean? And it's like with us, 100% of our resources that we raise from things like Moonbirds go right back into building amazing products. Like no one's getting any special bonuses or any big paydays here, and people that are curious on how that could 100% be the case. It's like once you take money from venture capitalists, you can't do that. Like you have to share your financials with the VCs as part of the terms of the investment. And it protects against those rugs in many ways. And so when I'm looking to kind of like, try out a new DeFi protocol or something like that, and I see, oh, Coinbase Ventures is an investor, or, Andreessen Horowitz or True Ventures, or these are like extra safety signals that it gives me as someone that's playing around with their products. So that would be a big signal. What was the other question though?
Like what are some of the projects that you align with? Like what is that required, right? Like
Yeah, so is the as in, there has to be, they're going after a very ambitious big space where we believe that they can when they win, it is a large outcome. Um, Oftentimes we like them to be early innovators in the space. So when we backed art blocks, for example, they were just crushing generative art. When we backed Quantum, there's no bigger player on the photography NFT side than Justin Arvesano and Jonas and what they're doing over at Quantum. Um, Tribute Labs is another one that we backed. They are the entire backend that powers all of Flamingo DAO, the Lao, Neon DAO. Like 10 of the world's biggest DAOs are all powered by Tribute. And so, that tooling, like they could be like, this is a horrible analogy, but it's kind of makes sense. They could be the legal Zoom for DAOs, right? And so we see that as being a massive market if DAOs become as big as we all think they're going to be. So, it's blue ocean, meaning are they the first and there's not a lot of competition, so there's a lot of room to move and innovate. How ambitious are they? Are they swinging for the fences? Like when I took money from True, they said, is this how big do you think this has become? And I said, we're playing to become a top 5 PFP utility project out there. Like we want to be as big as the best, and we're going after the bigs in this space. And I think that's what VCs get really excited about.
that's really awesome, bro. And like I know we're speaking about a lot of the successes on the podcast here, with like your success with Proof, your success with with the birds and things of that nature. But there's an opposite side of that token, right? Which is failure. And I want to dive into a little bit of that. What role has failure played in your successes?
It's the most important role. By far, it's the most important. Like failure, in my mind, is admitting that you've learned something new. It is that moment when you realize something didn't work, and that is the greatest teacher. It's like eh, it's like if any of you had kids, and I just had them for the first time just a few years ago, watching them fail is hard. It's crushing. but you can't tell them 1,000 times not to do something. It's only the first time they actually slam their fingers in the door do they care to not do it again. And that extends into adult life. And I have failed so many times. Businesses, tens of millions of
What's your most
dollars
successful
lost.
failure? What's your most
Oh,
successful
Digg.
failure to date?
Digg by
Digg?
far. When I created the first social news site and we raised $30 million for it, we had 38 million people a month coming to the site. Failed, completely failed, down to zero. The most expensive piece that we sold the patents for the Digg button, which is the way to that LinkedIn bought them because it was a way to defend against the Facebook like button because we actually had the patent for what became the Facebook like button, and then Microsoft bought them from LinkedIn. But outside of that, I mean, we sold those for $5 million. The company had raised 30, huge failure. So it's like, I learned a ton about management. I'd never fired someone before. I didn't know what it was like to lay people off for the first time. I didn't know what it was like to vet an engineer and honestly, to raise your hand and say I don't know something. That's a big ego hit to the ego when you can say I don't know this. Like, can you help me? I was scared to ask my investors when I didn't know something. I didn't want to be made to look like a fool, and so it's all these things that when you can just let go a little bit, release, like, and say to yourself, like, I'm okay with failure. Actually, it's the greatest teacher. Then you'll get back up, you jump back up and you try again. And that's been the theme that I've embraced as an entrepreneur. It's like you just if you're really in this, one loss or two losses won't get you out. It'll just be ways that you refine your thinking and then try again.
I love that. I think that's like incredibly salient advice for people who are, looking to enter the space or are entrepreneurs themselves or are, thinking about how they can build, as Web3 sort of unfolds. Kevin, you also have like a real proven track record of, being early to internet trends, skating to where the puck is going, as they say. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the future of Web3. Like, what's exciting you? Like, what are some areas that you think are being overlooked right now?
It's a great question. Um, I would say that the things that I'm avoiding right now, and then maybe we can get into the more exciting things. The things that I'm avoiding, the metaverse for me, um, feels like it's set up for failure. Like a lot of what we've seen out there, um, seems like a repeat of things that have already kind of petered out or not really been that successful. Um, when I saw Zuckerberg's demo of the future of the metaverse and he showed two people sitting down virtually playing chess with each other, I was like, we're not thinking big enough. Like this is like I was doing that on AOL in 1997. Like there's no need that we do this all over again, right? And then when I play with some of these other metaverses where it's just like an endless expansive land where you're just running around looking for something to do with no engagement and no purpose, that to me feels, and then you're like, okay, how do I get my mouse cursor back? Oh yeah, it's escape. Like it's just like it's so the ones that win that I think that will be the winners in the metaverse space are the ones that are either going to have a very tight purpose where it'll almost be like a game in that sense. I mean, the reason why Roblox and Minecraft and all those are they're metaverses. They're just not decentralized, and that I'm sure they'll eventually get there. But the reason they're so successful is that they're purpose driven. There's like a reason to be in there. That you have a goal. It's a game in a sense. The why you're in there. Those will do quite fine. I think Sandbox will do good in that arena. That's interesting. But the ones that are just kind of these galleries and a bunch of people get together for 10 minutes and then all disperse, like those to me feel too open ended. And so what I'm interested in building in that space is very focused use cases around community and Web3 that will have a purpose when you land in there. So it's not just about awkward floating bodies bumping into each other, if that makes sense. And then in terms of the other things I'm excited about, I'm excited for a lot of the rough edges to be sanded down. I think layer twos on ETH are a pain in the ass right now. We need them desperately, and we need them to be 2 clicks or 1 click, not 15 clicks and waiting for things to traverse across chains. And it's just
Totally.
You got the pain points, and then it's like you're so right, bro. Holy shit! Like just like
I mean, it's you sit there and you're like, okay, I get it. I'm doing this. I get it. But my mom won't get this, and my anybody else that isn't as geeky as I am, which there are which is 99% of other people out there, you
and
know.
people who don't have the patience for that,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Because we've been so conditioned for one click logins. We've been so conditioned for like Apple Pay, for example, just pay with your face, that type of situation, right? Like it migrate, like going from Uniswap to then transfer to then Polygon, then waiting for the swap, and then to Solana, and then coming back, and then like, it's real, bro. The pain
yeah.
points are
But
real. You bring up some excellent points.
I will say the one thing that is awesome about that is that that just means we're early, which is great, and that means
Yeah.
there's a lot of upside still to be had because the masses haven't come yet. As much as we
Yep.
think they have in the sense that Coinbase has X number of millions of accounts and that they're buying Bitcoin and ETH and all of that, that's great, but like the real usage and utility of the blockchain hasn't really fully hit yet. So that for me is exciting. And I hope we get there sooner rather than later. I think we're probably another 3 years out of really just like refining this stuff to where it can finally get into a usable state where consumers will be like, oh, and you know who's doing a good job of this is, well, I love seeing what Square is doing. I think, well, they're called Block now. I think they're great technologists that also understand that things need to be really simple. Like I paid someone the other day. I was just giving them a tip, and I was in the Square app and I opened it up, and it was like, oh, actually, I can just tip them in Bitcoin, and it literally was just like a button that you tap. It was like cash or Bitcoin. I'm like, and I didn't even have any Bitcoin. I was like, oh yeah, I'll give them the $5 in Bitcoin. I didn't have my Bitcoin in Square, and so I just tapped on it and it instantly just made that happen. And they received their very first Bitcoin. And the guy's like, "Whoa, I never done the Bitcoin thing before. Cool." And that just onboarded a new user. Like
Love that.
that's magic. That's the simplicity that we need this place
That
to be at.
you said it. You put it right. You nailed the head. Like you said it. The word magic, right? Like what's that phrase? Like technology is just a way of making magic make sense. Like of it, right? Thinking, bringing it to reality. And so, look, like I know you touched on the biggest challenges on the on-chain stuff, but would love to see how like what are some of the challenges that you're seeing for NFTs, and how can we overcome them for mainstream adoption?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the gas wars are real. They will be on the most popular drops. I mean, the botting stuff that we chatted about is real. In terms of NFTs, I think that we're going to rely heavily on people that are helping on the curation side and really truly have a point of view. Like it's going to become easier to mint NFTs, not harder. I mean, Solana, you can do it for a few pennies and a few clicks, right? And now we have integration into OpenSea, and we've seen what Polygon has done in terms of the airdrops that are coming to our random wallets, and it was just like I didn't even want that, and now it's in my wallet, right? So it's going to get easier for them to move around and easier for them to be minted, which is fantastic, but it also leads to spam problems. And it's going to, everyone armed with Photoshop is now an artist, an NFT artist. And so, how can we cut through the things that are really important and whether it be projects and people that are building or individual artists and highlight their amazing take on art. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot of pain to unpack there in that whole space, but um, we'll see how it unfolds. I think Super Rare is doing some really interesting things with like their curation boards and allowing kind of traditional art galleries to come on board and create dedicated little spaces where they can showcase their famous picks. And like I think the world's going to need more of those trusted advisors in this space because when you have people that come on, they're like, oh, a buddy told me about this PFP. It's, Flying Kittens 4 or whatever. And they go on there and they spend 2 grand and then they're worth, $50 the next day or less. They're like, oh crap, I'm never playing with this NFT thing again. So there needs to be trusted people like yourselves and others that are coming, that are helping educate and helping people avoid a lot of the stuff that's going to be coming.
Yeah, 100%. The last thing we want as, big believers in the future of this is a repeat of what happened with the ICOs in 2017, 2018, where, so many good people were burned and left the space with a bad taste in their mouth and really set back, I think, mainstream adoption on that front. Um,
But this is all cyclical stuff. Like I feel like we're anytime you're in a new market like that, there's so much excitement, and people see it that they rush in with capital. And so we saw this in Web 1 back in the day. I mean, I was a youngin' back then, but I do remember it, and I was there watching it all unfold. And in 2000, everyone was pouring in every dollar they had into the future of the web, right? And 98% of them went out of business. But guess what? eBay, PayPal, and Amazon, they all came out of that, and they're massive companies now. So and then Web 2, we kind of got it a little bit more right. It was like a lot more thoughtful about the deployment of capital. Still had a lot of failures, but got some big businesses out of that. And so, we're gonna see similar type waves here, where ton of interest, ton of capital, ICO style markets, a lot of them go away, and then we learn and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, do you remember the days where it was like your parents used to tell you not to put your credit card number online, or like
Oh
don't
yeah,
click on the
dude.
ads? Remember those days? Remember
Oh,
like yeah, like yeah, like
absolutely. There was a
yeah.
big scare. Well, I remember when like people, I would tell my parents about Amazon, and they're like, "Wait, you store your credit card on with them? Like, no way anybody's doing that?"
Yeah, and like you're showing the last four digits of my number on the web, like the four
Right.
digits. Oh my God, right? Like I remember that, man. I remember my dad scolding me one time because I accidentally clicked on a advertising on it. And he's like, "You're gonna the whole computer is gonna be malware, disconnected from the internet right now." So I was like,
Oh,
"What?"
for sure. Yeah,
Like
like, where are you
that was the
downloading your
days.
software from? Like, it was like,
Kazaa, bro, Kazaa and LimeWire, that's for sure.
oh yeah, that was full of viruses. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Facts, facts.
LimeWire and all those other ones that were out there.
Oh man.
Speaking of P2P, like what advice do you have for community builders in the Web3 space?
It's a good question. I think that well, you kind of have to start with a niche of like-minded individuals, and then grow from there. So like find your voice, find your unique take. When I be the people Many people don't know this, but before I started the Proof Collective, what I did is I opened up a little private Discord that was just for friends. And I didn't know Discord. I was not a hardcore gamer using it prior to that. And so I went in and just did the deep dive late night, like understanding what are these bots that you can add to it, like what can I do that's different here. And then I started becoming friends with some of these artists that I'd collect their pieces and tell them how much I love with their artwork, and I'd invite them in. And so it quickly grew to 20, 30 plus artists, like, and then they become more kind of household names. And then I launched the Proof Collective on top of that. And I said, artists, you don't have to leave. You're here. If you're an artist, you're always welcome. You get in for free because you're an artist. And then I was able to bridge and have actual conversations happen between top tier artists in the collective directly with the consumers that were buying their art or that were interested in their art. And so it was very small when it first got going. So if you're doing it from a place of passion, even in your darkest hours, you will still love to do it. And so, the reason we talked about this, like I sold all my Proof Collective passes because I never thought they were going to be worth that much, but I loved mingling with the artists. It was so much fun to have conversation with these artists. Like if you could, I remember just chatting with like Dmitry Cherniak, who did Ringers, and he was in the Discord just chatting, and I was like, this is so cool. I got the Ringers guy in there, and like we're having a conversation about this stuff, and it came from a place of passion. And so I didn't even pay attention to the price of the collective badge. I didn't care if it was a 1 ETH or a quarter of an ETH or half ETH. I was doing it because I was making new friends. And so if you're building community, just make sure you're not trying to like, oh, I'm going to do an alpha group about this. And it's like, where's your true passion? When there's a nuclear NFT crypto winter, and prices are 1/3 what they are, which, it's a very lumpy market out there, NFTs and crypto in general. So obviously we'll go through these cycles. Are you still going to show up with the same amount of passion that you have today for it? Or is it just because the prices are pumping? And so, ask yourself that question when you're building your new community. Is this something that is like something I would be a part of, even if it wasn't tied to a financial outcome? And if the answer is yes, then you're in a really good place.
Love that. Love that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts too, as an avid collector in the space, someone who was clearly, obviously early when it came
X
to
copy.
like,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Love that. But also on the generative side and like, so I always think back to like that triangle that Supiom posted with like the NFT money flow, like collectibles to generative to one of one art. And I'm curious to hear like where do you see sort of like the money flow? How do these sort of different areas of art, crypto art, generative art, et cetera, kind of interplay in the market in your eyes?
Oh man, that's a really tough question. I have a horrible answer for you, which is I honestly collect what I'm really drawn to. So when I think about it, like I play in all those different markets, and it's largely because I found something that when the prices are down or half or a quarter, I'll still be happy to have it on my digital frame in the wall at some point, you know? And I think a lot of mistakes that are made are people that if they get knocked down by a third and then they're like, I'm out, and they sell something off, and then the market rebounds and it starts to appreciate a particular piece of art, and then all of a sudden they missed out because they sold too soon. Like I was buying NFTs. I remember when Fidenzas dropped, and the floors were just a couple ETH, and people had made their 2x, and they were out, and they were like, and they're flipping it, and I was just like, no, this is a long term hold. This is a very important piece. These are the very first generative pieces that look like actual art. This is Tyler Hobbs. Like, what are you doing? And so you got to do your due diligence and do your deep dive on who these artists are, the code involved, like who they're going to be long term, and then push him with that conviction, and then lock it up forever. That's my take. And that's, so I very rarely sell, just because I think we're in such early days here. I can't bring myself to want to sell a piece. It's very, very tough if I love the artists. And so I buy across all those fun. In terms of where the money is flowing, it's so funny that varies week to week, doesn't it? Like you see like a hot PFP pop, and then all of a sudden, X copy does something and that blows up, and then there'll be a new mechanic that comes out that no one's ever thought of, and that is explosive. Then utility starts getting, it's like it's so hard to predict. I try not to play that game. I rather just like, the things I look for are, either artists I just really love, or people that are doing novel things, like something that hasn't been done before and it's being done for the very first time. I think that things that will and hold a place in history as being the first in something. Like I love Chromie Squiggles for that reason, right? The very first Project Zero on Art Blocks. Like I think those are like, that was an amazing drop. And so I hold those, and like early X copies. Like I think in 5 years or less time, we'll quickly understand that this is the Banksy of the digital world, And so there's certain pieces there, but everybody's different. Matt Cain, like what a crazy awesome artist, literally writes his own software to create the art. Like his brushes are his code. Doesn't use Photoshop, doesn't use Illustrator, like codes his own brushes from scratch. Like mind-blowing stuff. Like that's the stuff I'm really attracted to.
Love that. I love that. Well, look, as we kind of bring things to a close, I know you've got Moonbirds coming April 16th. Any kind of final words or remarks, anything you wanted to speak to as to that, or what you have coming up in addition to that?
It's a good question. I think that this drop is going to be crazy. I think the only thing to really note that is it's not lost on us, the expectations that we have around Proof, the collective, and what we're building, and we're being very thoughtful to hire the absolute best talent to work on everything that we build going forward. And so, I've been very fortunate to have had a great run in terms of like investing and all these other things. And so when I think about what we want to build here, we're kind of swinging for the fences here. We want to be a top 5 PFP, and we think we can get there by doing some things that people have never expected or seen before. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what gets me so excited about this. Is Justin and Mazel and the art is just gorgeous stuff, but more than that, and then on top of that, it's how we extend it that I think people are going to be shocked by. So more to come on that front, but I hope y'all will just join us for the adventure. It's going to be a fun multi-year adventure to get to where we want to be.
There it is.
Yo,
Well,
Matt, clear my meetings, bro. I'm not doing anything that day, man.
April 16th. Yeah. We'll wipe it clean. Yeah, you can't be distracted on that day. Well, look, Kevin, appreciate you coming on today. Great chatting, and yeah, look forward to continuing the conversation and seeing where everything you're building grows.
Thank you all, and thanks for putting out the great content. Like I truly believe, and the reason why I wanted to come on your show is like there's a handful of shows out there that are trying to, educate and entertain and do the things in the right way. And so, you know, I think that we need to be pushing this space forward in a way that isn't just about, I think there's no shade being thrown at people that want to make money in the space, but like it has to be done in a responsible way, in a way that puts the emphasis on really artists, proper projects, not just the shiny object of the day. And so I appreciate you all participating in that conversation.
Means a lot. Really appreciate that. And yeah, we're building this space together. So let's do it responsibly.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Wow, that was quite a conversation. Where to start? Ale, what stood out to you?
Man, what didn't stand out? I think the most important thing for me that really stood out from coming from my coaching background is really how deep he went into his failures, right? And like how important failures were to his successes, going into Digg and losing $30 million to then just consistently going into moving forward, right? So many other people would have been shut down. Like that complete failure could actually, in one way or another, freeze you, right? And you just see Kevin just navigate it so full of grace, and actually not only grace but giving back, right? To become an investor, you have to be able to believe in others, right? As much as you're believing in yourself. And I also love that he has been an incredible advocate about bringing value to the NFT space, right? Making sure that he backs legitimate projects, making sure that he's outspoken around innovation and the copycats and things of that capacity. So just loved his energy. I'm super excited for this new project that's launching on April 16th. I'm also just bullish on Kevin Rose on all things.
Likewise. Yeah, I really loved his perspective on the metaverse. I loved his perspective too on his collection and collecting and investment ethos. As someone who also errs on the side of long-term hodling and collects with conviction, a lot of what he said about what he looks for in the early X copies and that like really resonated with me and my thoughts as well. So it was just really cool to get his perspective on so many different subjects. He's clearly figured out and cracked the code on creating value for his community in Web3, and excited to see where he takes it. So yeah, thanks for listening. Appreciate you all, and we'll catch you next time on the NFT Now podcast.